Hey everybody, what's happening? Welcome to today's video. I'm Brian K, and today we're going to be talking about how we can use a triad shape, right, in our blues to help us outline a dominant 7 chord, okay, which is a hip thing to be able to do. But before we get into it, I want to thank everybody who has come out here and showed some support for the channel, subscribed and made comments on the videos. It really does go a long way, you know, to help the channel. And if you haven't done so already and you dig the content that I'm bringing out here on YouTube and out on Rumble, right? Go ahead, like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel, because those little things really go a super long way, right? To help the channel continue to grow, okay? So let's get into the video. All right, now we're gonna look at a simple triad shape, right, that we can use to help us outline a dominant 7 chord in our blues, okay? And we'll focus predominantly on the 1 chord in our blues. And today is a key of G, right? A key of G major kind of day, okay? And we're gonna be looking at a blues in G. So it's gonna be basic 1, 4, 5 changes. But today we're gonna do a 16-bar blues, okay? So you learn the structure of a 16-bar blues also in today's video, okay? Now, this triad that we're going to look at in the key of G major is going to be on our 1 chord. So we're looking at basically a G major chord, you know? That's your 1 chord, which is simply just a triad. There's only 3 notes, a root note, a major third, right? And a 5th if it's a major triad. You got 1, 3, 5, right? And the triad shapes that we're going to look at are going to be right here, you know, between like the 3rd and like 8th fret area here on the fretboard, right? It's 2 triad shapes that we'll look at. One is going to be the D chord that we all know. This is a triad. If you just look at the top 3 strings, and the root note happens to be where your ring finger is playing that B string right there, okay? So your B string, the 3rd finger or your ring finger, right? That's the root note for that triad. You can move this. You don't want to hear any of the other strings when you use this as a triad. You just want to move that triad shape, the top 3 strings in this D chord shape, with that being the root note. And if you go up here, right to the 8th fret, you're going to have a G, which is going to be the root note for this G major triad, right? Okay? Okay, cool. Now the other one is basically coming out of the big old bar chord that we all know for a major chord, you know, this low E string root note major bar chord, right? But check it out, these top 3, well, the middle 3 strings, the D string at the 5th fret, right? That G string at the 4th fret and the B string here at the 5th fret, that's a triad also. It's this, it's a triad just like that D-shaped triad is, with, you know, your index finger at the 8th fret of the B string, but you have your 2nd finger here at the 7th fret of the high E string, and you have your 1st finger at the 7th fret of the G string. They're both G major triads in the key of G major that we're in today for our blues. And we're saying, okay, dominant 7 chords, right? Well, a dominant 7 is simply just putting a flatted 7, right? You know, the theory behind all this stuff, it's a flatted 7. It's not the same as a major 7. That's different. This is a dominant 7. Right, a flat 7. So it's not hard to get to that note off of your triad, and this is how you can begin to outline like the chord in your blues. Now what I'm going to show you will work with both minor pentatonic and major pentatonic. Both scales, you could do this with both of them, okay? And when you're looking at dominant 7 chords, the minor pentatonic scale is going to fly, so it's a cool scale to be able to use over your dominant 7 chords in a blues, you know? You can use that good old minor pentatonic, and you could also use your major triads right off your 1 chord, in this case off of the G. you can work this dominant 7 in there. I'm going to show you how to do it. Okay? Now, if you're looking at this triad, we'll look at this triad off of the big bar chord shape first, right? Where you have, you know, that shape right here on the D string, the G string, and the B string, right? Well, your root note is going to be your ring finger on this D string. That's the G, all right? And the dominant 7 is going to be 2 frets lower. So you go 2 frets lower than the root note, and you have your dominant 7. And it's real easy to get to that dominant 7 off of the, well, if you're playing minor pentatonic scale, you're already playing that note when you play the scale, right? Once you get there to the D string in your first position, say minor pentatonic scale, if you know this is all you need to know to be able to use this triad right here, right? You can also add the major third, but we won't get too far into this area. Just look at, okay, well, what can we do, right? Just use the triad with the scale, so you can add the triad in with going to that dominant 7 and working that dominant 7 sound off the triad. 2 ways to go. Just one is just go from the root note down to the dominant 7, or you could go in half steps and do the note in between, that little neighbor tone in there. You can go chromatic, and you can move between the root note and the dominant 7. And if you're playing the triad and you're in your minor pentatonic scale, you could also add the major third in there and start crafting some cool licks. So that's how you can get there on that triad. And if you're up here with that D chord shape, right, with the root note at the 8th fret on your B string right there, you're playing, basically looks like a D chord because that's the shape. Well, you're in the upper part of your second position minor pentatonic scale in this case that we're looking at right now. You're up here, right, your dominant 7 off that triad is living a whole step below your root note, and you can do the same thing. You can get there with half steps. You can go back and forth, and of course you can add the major third, right? You can add that note into the scale also, and you're outlining the triad, so you're putting this triad into your minor pentatonic scale in this case. You can connect them. And all of a sudden, hey, it starts sounding a little hipper than just only playing the minor pentatonic scale only. Get a little hip factor in there by putting the triad into that minor pentatonic scale. And you can do the same thing with the major pentatonic scale, because you can use both of these scales if you're in the key of G major on your blues, right? You can use the major pentatonic scale too. It's gonna fly, okay? But you know, again, if you want to work that dominant 7 sound into the major pentatonic scale, you have to be hip to the fact that, you know, you got that root note of your triad, in this case the triad here at the, you know, between the 3rd and the 5th fret on the D, G, and B string. Just go a whole step below your root note, there's your dominant 7, which is a note that's outside of the major pentatonic scale. Because it's right there, a whole step, right, 2 frets lower than your root note. So you'd want to add that into the major pentatonic scale, in this case outline the dominant 7 chord, because you can play that dominant 7 chord and do it with the major pentatonic scale. Just add them, you have to add that note in like you had to add the 3rd in on the minor pentatonic scale. You have to add that major third of the triad in there. Well, you can add the dominant 7 in on your major pentatonic scale. And you're, again, you got cool hip things happening with the major pentatonic scale. And you're cooking with some gas, okay? So that is the easy way. You could just go to the whole step below the root on either one of these triads, or you can do the half step that's in between dominant 7 and the root note. You could play it both ways, right? And you could work these triads into both the major and minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so that's the good news with this, and it's not hard to do, right? But let's look at, okay, 16 bar blues real quick, right? Here's an easy outline for a 16 bar structure. Our blues in G with dominant 7 chords, right? G7 is our 1 chord. You're gonna hang out on that 1 chord for the first 8 bars. So you just hang out on the 1. So you're gonna be playing a G7 chord, G major or G7, right? For 8 bars. And then when you get to the 9th and the 10th bar of this 16 bar blues, right? You're going to be on the 4 chord. You could play C major in this case, or C7, right? Your dominant 7 chord for the 9th and 10th bar. Then you go back home to the 1 chord, right? G or G7 for the 11th and the 12th bar. And then you get to the turnaround section, basically, of your 16 bar blues. You go to your 5 chord, you go to D major or D7, right? Or D9. Any one of those chords are going to get you there on your 5 chord. And you're there for the 13th bar. Then you go down to the 4 chord. For the 14th bar, go from that D down to C, or D7 or D9 down to C7 or C9, right? Or C major. Okay, then you have your 15th bar, which is back home to the 1 chord, right? G or G7. And then your 16th bar back to the 5 chord for the 16th bar. So you're on your D7 or your D9 or your D major chord, right? And that's your 16 bar structure. That's how you can start getting into something other than the 12 bars, right? And you get into your 16 bar blues, right? So, okay, so look, let's get into some auditory, right, sonic examples, right, of how we can use this major triad, right, on the 1 chord, start outlining that dominant 7 chord sound. Okay, so as we can hear, right, being able to outline that dominant 7 chord just gives us more options, expands our creativity, gives us some more cool things to say when we're rocking out on the blues. So enjoy this concept, have fun using it, okay? Enjoy playing your guitar, and we'll see you next time.